No Nose Knows. Written by Irrespective. Chapter 1. Woops. The Grand Station or the Canterlot is a sight that one must see to truly understand. It is a grandiose place of a scale that tends to boggle the imagination, yet is inspiring at the same time. Baked Bean looked up from his notebook and considered the words he had just written there. As a first line in a Trevor brochure, it could use some work. Well, a lot of work, but that was for the editing process later. Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and all that. No pony outside of Canterlot would want to read an advertising brochure that included the soot and loose cinders blowing around on the breeze, so a little creative adjustment was in order. A visitor will first notice the sheer size of the building. With 25 tracks entering and exiting, the building encompasses such a vast territory that several small hamlets would be able to fit within it and still leave some room for modest gardens. The ceiling is a grand vaulted affair, with pale yellow glass interwoven between the steel girders and supports in overshield-sized shapes and configurations. The walls are simple red brick, bound together with white mortar. Large bay windows are set every 10 to 15 feet along the sides, allowing for a great deal of natural lighting to enter, and for visitors to catch their first glance of Canterlot, proper as they leave their trains and move towards their destinations. Several shops and open-air stalls are scattered among the tracks, offering such sundries as luggage, newspapers, and magazines, and a great many basic necessities that a pony may have forgotten in their haste to pack. The shops are surrounded by throngs of ponies, so business is brisk, with a train arriving or departing every 7 minutes on average. No one never has to wait long for customers to filter by. Bright signage advertises the wares, both from rooftops and from the ground level, and one will occasionally hear the calls of the owners, enticing any and all to come and partake. Baked Bean sighed, slid his pencil into the spiral binding along the top of his notebook, and placed both in his saddlebag. He had gotten a good start in his description of the station. There was still one more stop he wanted to make before getting some food and heading back to his hotel room for the night. I hope I'm not overdoing the descriptions, he muttered to himself as he merged into the crowd and began walking towards the exit. He was new to writing, and with no formal training he was forced to improvise for the moment and hope he wasn't screwing up too badly. Still, he remained hopeful that he could perhaps earn enough bits to pay for a modest place outside some more affordable countryside with his tour guide descriptions, leaving enough leftover pay for some creative writing classes. Then he would feel confident to write his story. The air outside the station felt clean and a bit crisp as he walked out into Celestia's bright sunlight. He had been sitting in the station for a few hours before he had begun writing, hoping to absorb the atmosphere and feel what Equestria's third-largest rail terminal. Now that he was out in the fresh air, he realized that he should have left a bit sooner. But a few deep breaths rejuvenated his spirits and sent him on his way with a sprightly step. Indeed, he began using adjectives, or were they adverbs, in his mind to describe the bright marble storefronts and homes that lined the broad avenue. Words like resplendent and radiant and respectful first came, then followed by stately and magnificent, so he wouldn't use too many words starting with R. However he described them, the overall feel of Canterlot's architecture was summed up to him in one word: breathtaking. There was a small part of him that would like to live here, surrounded by the gilded trappings and the peaceful structures that made Canterlot the world-renowned capital that it was. Despite the obvious affluence that was on display before him, there was a definite feeling of openness and acceptance, and every pony he passed was far friendlier than he anticipated. The overall feeling of home that radiated from the core of the city outwards was extended to all who came, just as Equestria was open to any who wished to avail themselves of the opportunities that could be found within her borders. Yes, Baked Bean felt like he was being treated quite well. Of course, Canterlot was known for being very accommodating to tourists and visitors, whether they had come to petition the royal sisters as they sat in court or were simply here to take in the sights. It was delightfully easy to find a hotel room, and more restaurants featured a light and thrifty section, so ponies from all across Equestria could enjoy the flavorful experience of Canterlot without breaking the bank. But even in the generous city, a pony needed to have some bits in hoof, and Baked Bean was quickly running out of them. Though he could possibly stretch his purse for another week or two, he would soon find himself in a soup kitchen line if he didn't get some sort of income going. Hence his trip to the station, and now his quick canter over to the royal gardens. The flowers were said to be beyond compare there, several unique varieties that could only be found within the neatly trimmed hedge walls. One could almost stroll along softly gurgling fountains, great stone sculptures, and if one was really lucky, even catch a glance of Princess Celestia herself. It was rumored that she frequently strolled the gardens, and while she didn't usually have the time to meet with ponies for very long, she would make an effort to at least greet and share a few pleasantries with those who would happen to be nearby. Baked Bean didn't believe his luck would be willing to favor him with such a visit, so he wasn't really interested in waiting around to try to catch a glimpse of the fair Princess of the Sun. Though she was well renowned for her beauty and her intelligence, he felt that nearly everything that could be written about the daytime Diarch had already been produced, and that there was nothing he could add to the subject matter. He was content to write about plants, and perhaps he could, coupled with his train station description, would be enough to get some pony, give him a serious opportunity to make his mark. Well, no, he had his cutie mark already. He wanted something more out of life, something beyond the destiny that was written on his flank, and maybe he could find it here. The walk to the gardens was a short one, with only a couple of wrong turns taken and some cheerfully happy directions given by both patrolling guard ponies and pleasant locals. Once Baked Bean did arrive, he took a slow walk around and admired the beauty of the reds, blues, and greens before him, and he especially enjoyed the smooth aromas that drifted past his nose. Everything he needed was there. The neat rows of shrubbery, the patchwork planting of roses, hyacinths, and gardenias, soft and sweet grass, the cobble and flagstone paths that meandered about the place without a care in the world. He had nearly forgotten the reason why he'd come in the first place. And for several long minutes he simply soaked in the serenity and balance. These gardens seemed almost indescribable, but he was determined to try. The air is awash with sweet smells of such a variety of fauna that he stopped and shook his head. No, flora is for plants, fauna for wildlife. Okay. The flora is such that one can spend most of the day amongst the petals and vines, admiring all the lush life and distinct blooms that can only be found within this serene place. Is that too verbose? Maybe not enough. Perhaps I need to use a few more adverbs. But was he really after adverbs, or was it prepositional phrases? Oh, how it drove him nuts! He just knew he was meant to be a writer, but having such a very loose understanding of the rules made it so difficult to know if he was doing things right or wrong. Growing frustrated with his lack of skill, Bean moved towards the large sunflower patch that was shining nearby and glared at them for a moment, as if they were his source of inability and defeats. There just had to be a way to describe these things, and by Luna's left leg, he was going to figure it out or he would eat his horseshoes. The best way to prevent adding far too much iron into his diet was to immerse himself in the subject material he was intended to write about, and this was promptly accomplished by shoving his snout into the sunny suckers, and ignoring any discomfort he might feel until he came up with a way to write, or he was sensing. Robust, earthy, homely and simplistic, laxing, none seemed to fit totally. He struggled for perhaps a good 15 minutes before deciding he needed to be more immersed. He moved his front half into the tall green stalks, so any pony else who was walking by would see nothing more than two rear legs and a twitching, swishing tail. With his eyes shut tight enough to see little lights outside his eyelids, he began again. Peaceful, ennobling, uplifting, inspirational, motivational? Wait, what? No, that was what he was after, not what the flowers were. He quickly shoved his whole self into the flowers so that no pony could see him as they walked by, and once again he took a stab at success. Standing straight and lifting his snout in the air in the hopes of catching either a scent or a muse, he stood stock still, held a deep and calming breath, and proceeded to think. So focused on inspiration was that he began to block out anything that didn't pertain to the feel of the flowers. His ears slowly washed away the sound of a blissful background of white noise. His eyes clamped down shut to prevent stray thoughts from seeing something not sunflower-related, and his breathing stifled into a deathly whisper. Slowly, over a period of half an hour or so, he achieved a sort of bizarre zen balance with the tasty seed producers. And then... what was it? Was this the inspiration felt like when it began to distill upon a pony? Was he about to achieve the breakthrough that he was so desperately seeking? And why did inspiration feel like some pony was touching his nose? His eyes slowly opened, with the hope that the words that would perfectly describe the sunflowers would be floating before him in a grand, gold-branded, swoopy cursive style. Instead, what he saw was a snow-white face, connected to a snow-white nose, touching his own. Gah! He shouted and his legs jammed into reverse. He fell over himself as he tumbled out of the sunflowers and then stumbled, fumbled, flipped, and flopped for a moment to both get himself oriented on the cobblestones and to figure out what in equestrian had just happened. Hello, a voice called. Who's there? Baked Bean's mind took a fraction of a second to race into the past. To his mind's eye came the summer sun celebration in Las Pegasus during a family vacation when he was but a small colt, and he recalled how in awe he felt at the time when he watched Princess Celestia gracefully and dramatically raise the sun before the assembled crowd, thus beginning the longest day of the year. He recalled hearing Celestia's voice. Though the exact words she had said had been lost, he could still hear her tone, her pitch, her timbre. Complicated math questions had never been a strong point, but his mind quite easily managed to put 2 and 2 together, and was horrified when the answer turned out to be 4. The voice that had just called out hello was... He had just booped Princess Celestia's nose with his own. His eyes went wide in shock. There had to be at least 3 dozen laws against doing such a thing, if not 4. He had probably just committed a capital offense by even standing in the flowers, and since he had been hiding in the flowers and he had booped the princess, he probably thought he was some kind of thief or an assassin who was just waiting to strike and had bungled the job. Again, his legs flew in reverse and he tried to twist around and move as fast as he could down the path that he entered. Perhaps if he ran away just fast enough, they wouldn't bother to pursue him and there, he's running away. Well, that didn't just bite the bark. Hold! Stop! There was no way Bean was going to comply with that order. He could only think of running as fast as he could to come back to the train station, hopefully losing the guards in the crowd, then hoping on a train bound to anywhere but at Canterlot and never coming back. Every other option ended with him being banished to the Everfree Forest, imprisoned, or being imprisoned in a previously unknown jail in the Everfree Forest. Now, in fairness, Baked Bean was a pretty decent runner. Though no all-star in high school, he had long enough legs to be one of the faster ponies among his friends, and he had been on a long-distance track team for 3 years straight. There was a somewhat decent chance of him eluding the guards who were chasing after him, and a respectable chance that he could complete his poorly devised plan. That was until Celestia's magic seized him, hoisted him up to the air, and began levitating him back toward her. Where are you going, my little pony? Celestia asked. Usually ponies run to me, not away from me. I'm dead. I'm dead. I've died and I'm dead and I'm going to be drawn and quartered and turned into glue. Maybe they'll be nice and use my tail for a violin bow at least. Please, come here. I need to talk to you. I'm so sorry, he wailed. I had no idea you were there. I'll pay whatever fine there is for trampling the flowers. Just please don't throw me in jail, or banish me to the Everfree, or build a jail in the Everfree and throw me in 3 or... Celestia's magic clamp beans shut before he could prattle on along anymore. Why does every pony believe that I'm going to imprison them in a place I banish them to? She asked herself. I've never done that. Never even threatened it. I bet Twilight is behind this somehow, along with that silly magic kindergarten thing I keep hearing about. She then took a moment to appraise him, and then there was an awkward silence for Bean before she spoke again. Now, I'm going to let go of your muzzle. Please don't beg for mercy when you don't even know if you're in trouble or not. All right? He nodded and felt the magic release. There, now, let's just talk for a moment, shall we? I want to discuss what happened. All right, I can talk. I'm very good at talking, and her magic grabbed his muzzle again. Stop that. You're not from Canterlot, are you? No, Your Highness, he replied once the magic released again. She lowered him enough to look him straight in the eye. You have the most interesting accent in your voice. You must be from Salt Lake, yes? How do you know that? He breathfully asked. I see I'm correct. She chuckled. Most likely born and raised there. It's not too difficult to discern individual lits and draws after a few centuries of travel, you know. I would imagine so, Your Highness, and you have a very keen ear, if I may say. She gave him an annoyed look. Sweet-talking me won't get you out of trouble right now. Sorry. Now I'm going to put you down, and I'm going to let you out of this magic field. I want you to not run away. Understand? Yes, I do. Good. Instead of running away, I want you to tell me who you are and why you were in the sunflowers. You're not going to be banished, and you're not going to be imprisoned. And you're not going to be imprisoned in the place that I banish you. I understand. Good. She replied while she lowered and then released him. Now, your name, please. Baked Bean, Your Highness. Mr. Bean, then. A pleasure to formally make your acquaintance. Would it be out of place to say the pleasure is mine? Only if you say it to get out of trouble. If you mean it, then I will accept it as a compliment. I very much mean it. As for your flowers, it's, Yes? Celestia prodded. It's a bit hard to explain. I was trying to describe the sunflowers. You described the sunflowers by putting yourself in the middle of them? Well, it was an experiment, he sheepishly admitted as one hoof rubbed the opposite leg in embarrassment. I came to Canterlot yesterday to start a career as a writer, but I'm not very good at it yet. Celestia took a long time in response, slowly shaking her head from side to side. Just yesterday? No wonder you're having problems. You should have seen some of the disasters Luna and I caused when we first started. She stopped and shook her head again. Well, never mind about that. Did you receive any inspiration? Why do you care? He asked. Look, I get that I screwed up, and I shouldn't have been in the flowers. I appreciate you not getting angry at me, but I really am willing to take my punishment, then just leave and never bother you again. She leaned in a bit, her eyes boring into his. The intensity made him flex backwards and gulp loudly. I believe you, she finally said after a few agonizing moments. But I'm afraid I can't just let you go. At least not yet. I will need you to remain here for the evening. I can do that. What hotel are you staying for while you're visiting here? I've been in the Shoe and Nail, not far from the train station. A fine choice. I've heard good things about that particular establishment. I will make sure your room is held for you while you are gone and reimburse you for the cost. Thank you, I guess. She nodded. I would like you to stay in the North Tower this evening. It's a bit drafty in winter, but in the summer heat it's really the best spot in the whole palace. I appreciate that, I guess. She nodded again and smiled at him, then mentioned one hoof towards the domicile. You're very welcome. I would also greatly appreciate if you would join me and Princess Luna this evening for dinner. I understand there will be very delicious rosemary salad with shredded carrots served for the main course. Why are you being so nice to me? He blurted as they began walking. Why shouldn't I be? She countered. I try to be kind to all my subjects. Well, yeah, but this is like way beyond what I would think is normal. I don't get the feeling that you're offering me free lodging and personal dinners to every pony you meet in the day. You would be correct in that regard, she replied with a heavy sigh. Not that I'm ungrateful for the hospitality, really. It just seems a bit much. Celestia nodded again. And it is most likely is, but it's to try to help you ease into what I need to tell you. About my punishment for being in those flowers and touching your nose? There is no law that says a pony can't be in the flower beds. A wistful tone slipped into her voice. And you are not the first pony to be found in them. As for my nose, well... I can take it, he offered with her words stalled. I hope you can. There is a law about, not against, touching my nose. It is a very old law and a very silly law. I should have revoked it many years ago, but I'm afraid it totally slipped my mind until now. Her words stalled again, and Bean glanced up at the Princess of Equestria while she apparently tried to sort out her thoughts. She was troubled, that was obvious. But what could possibly be bad touching her nose? Was it really just taboo, and would create a very awkward social scene for her? He just wished there was something he could do to help fix the mess he created. Come on, silly, just spit it out, she muttered under her breath, and then she inhaled deeply. Mr. Bean, the law states that the first stallion who touches my nose with their nose is to be my husband. Bean instantly locked up, both physically and mentally. Celestia managed to take 4 or 5 more steps before she realized he wasn't by her side anymore. She then craned her neck around. Ah! He forced out a laugh. That's a good one, Your Highness. You know, I heard you could be mischievous at times, but I never really could believe it until now. Me, forced to marry you? That's pretty good. You had me there for a second. I'm perfectly serious, she replied while he walked up to her again. Bean's legs again failed in the effort of forward motion. He then barked out another forced laugh. Ha! 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 All right, I get it. I made things very awkward for you by touching your nose. You'll have to explain what happened to some pony, and it'll be embarrassing. This whole marry me thing is just so I feel discomfort you're going to feel. But there's no way I could be the first pony to touch your nose with mine. I really am sorry it happened, truly. If you happen to know a time travel spell, I'll gladly go through it and pull myself out of those flowers so this will never happen. I'll write a confession. Whatever. Publicly shame me if you have to. I promise I'm not trying to shame you or make you feel uncomfortable as some sort of punishment. I am serious as the sun is bright. You need to marry me. There was some kind of reply trying to get out of Bean's brain, but it was squished like a bug under a wagon wheel as the full weight of what Celestia was saying settled in. There was no hint of a joke, no mirth, no gotcha look in her eyes at all. She really was serious. She fully expected him to marry her. But he sputtered out. What? Bah. Oh. Gah? Oh dear, Celestia sighed. Sergeant, will you run ahead and fetch some cold water for poor Mr. Bean here, please? Yes, ma'am. The guard quickly saluted and then ran off towards the palace. All right, Mr. Bean, take some deep breaths. It will be rather embarrassing if you pass out in the gardens and I have to take you to the infirmary. You, he said breathlessly, really expect me to marry you? There's no need to shout, she chided, and only for the moment. For the moment? Yes, please do try to relax. There may be a way to resolve this issue without resorting to drastic measures. I'm all ears, he replied as he forced himself to breathe in and out and count to 10. As I said, this is a very old law. In fact, it predates the unification of the tribes. Since it is so old and there is a very good chance there is a loophole or a technicality we can exploit to cancel the whole thing, as soon as I find that, you'll be free to leave and go about your affairs. I am asking you to stay here as a precaution more than anything. Why in Equestria does this law even exist? That is a long story. It might be better to explain in a more relaxed and friendly atmosphere. All right. I guess I'll follow you then. There, that's the spirit. Celestia beamed at him. Just this way, please. We'll soon have this sorted out, I promise. Wait, you're the princess. Bean spoke with sudden thought as he began walking again. Why can't you just void this law out, or veto it, or whatever the word is it for? Another long story. Believe me, I would if I could. It would make things so much easier. Suffice it to say for now, there are very few powerful magics at work with this law. What happens if I don't marry you? Challenged. Like if I somehow did run away? Well, I would cease to be a princess. Again, Bean's legs failed him. The revelations he was getting were beginning to feel more and more like anvils being dropped on his head. Repeatedly. Say what? He asked. It's sad to say, but it is true, Celestia replied as Bean forced motion to his hooves once more. The terminology of the law states that if I do not marry the stallion who touched my nose, I will cease to be the princess of Equestria. Is this cease as in your title is stripped away from you, but you go on living, or cease as in you cease to exist? Celestia glanced at him with a pleased look. I'm impressed you thought of both options, Mr. Bean, but more than my titles would be stripped away from me. I would also lose the ability to raise the sun. That one felt like 10 anvils at the same time, with a Rocco-strength blacksmith beating out a sword for good measure. You couldn't raise the sun? He sputtered again. Yes, only a princess can raise or lower a celestial body. It just helps keep rogue elements from messing around with things they shouldn't be touching. Why does everything you tell me just keep making the situation worse? I'm just trying to be honest with you so you know what you're dealing with. But please remember, I said there may be a loophole that we can exploit. If we find that, then none of this matters. I sure hope so. It's sounding very horrible otherwise.
Would marrying me be so horrible?
She asked. Well, no, he quickly offered. I don't think there's a stallion in his right mind who wouldn't want to be married with you.
Shining armor does not.
She said with a glint of playfulness in her eye that Bean nearly missed.
He is only interested in a single mare, and that is not me.
I don't mean him. I meant any stallions who are looking for a mare, he clarified quickly. And I also meant that all those bad things that would happen would be horrible.
Is that going to be a problem?
She asked seriously.
We cannot find a way out of this. Would you really deny me and bring all of these bad things about?
Of course not. I would do anything to make sure you're still a princess just like any pony else.
Good.
I just really hope we don't have to go through that way. He continued, but softly and more to himself. That's the last time I stand in any flower patch. There we go. The first chapter of No Nose Knows. A special thank you to the author for giving me permission to make this. And another special thank you to my Patreon donor, Chase Lee Master. I really appreciate any support. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this. Forgive me if this one feels slightly less edited than usual. I'm still getting a feel for this story. However, once I get a better feel for the slice of life type of atmosphere, I'll start doing some proper editing on these, but I wanted to get this out as a test for romance. Anyways, once again, I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day. Real quick, this is Editor Fire. Hi. How do you guys feel about this song? I've been trying to figure out a good music for romance, but of course this genre is more new to me than, say, like the epic of the Centurion Project or the somber of the Lunar Guardsman. So tell me how you guys feel about it. Anyways, have a wonderful day.